Alistair, you need to get up.
What is it?
You need to do a video response to the UK general election results.
The result won't be in for a few days. It'll be a hung parliament.
No, the SNP won by a landslide in Scotland. They took 56 out of 59 seats.
Yeah, but we knew that was going to happen. It's not going to affect the overall result, is it?
Yes, but despite that, the Conservatives have an overall majority in Westminster.
What? Get my camera!
Okay, so I don't have a lot of time here. I'm just going to have to jump straight in without scripting and hope that it all makes sense. I would like to start with an apology. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you will see that there are subtitles whether you want them or not. That is because after I posted my last video, somebody pointed out to me that the subtitles, the voice recognition software for YouTube, leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to penetrating my Scottish accent. This time I will script the subtitles myself, so they should be 100% accurate. I'd also like to apologise to the people of York, Korea, Greece, Cockerels, any person or group that was offended by what the subtitles say that I said. And now that I've done that, I can get on with doing a video about the UK general election results, and because it's a YouTube video I have to find some way of making that topic entertaining. So, in case you've been living under a rock for the last week and a bit, the Conservatives won the UK general election 2015. They have an overall majority in the House of Commons. Well, that's great news, isn't it? Yeah, honestly, I'm not lying, like some politicians. Yeah, I've been a Conservative all my life. Yeah. I've supported them through thick and thin, you know. It's just great. And I challenge you to find one bit of evidence, just one bit of evidence, that will prove categorically that I don't support the Conservative 100%. Just roll the damn clip. If you vote Conservative, you'll get a disaster. No wonder the Prime Minister's running scared. He would only turn up to one of those debates that they were having. And to be fair, he only needed one of them to get his point across. The plan is working. Stick with it. Well, of course the plan's working, David, but it's just a matter of how many folk we drive into poverty before we get there. Alright, so the problem with doing a parody video as the first video on a YouTube channel is that when you're in character, people can't really get a grasp of what the real you actually thinks. So let's just clarify that for a moment. I do not dislike the Conservatives. Conservatives are generally very nice people. Do I think the country should have voted Conservative? No. Do I have problems with their policies? Yes. But let's not go into detail on that, because that could be a separate video in itself. So let's not talk about how they are making a beeline straight for the Human Rights Act. They want to scrap that. Nobody has a problem with this, really? Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about how they're planning to sell off the NHS piece by piece. I mean, David Cameron sounded convincing when he said that you wouldn't do that, but don't look at what he's saying, look at what he's doing, look at what he did in the last 5 years that he had a coalition government, what he did to the NHS then. Suffice to say that he's going to wish he hadn't when he has to pay for an operation to remove Alex Salmond's shoe from his rear end. But if the Conservatives are that bad, why did they win? Well, let's look at who they were up against. Labour. Let's start in Scotland. Scotland has traditionally been Labour heartland. There are 59 House of Commons seats in Scotland, and in the 2010 general election, Labour took 70% of them. This time round, they took 1 out of the 59 seats. Now that is not the be-all and end-all, that is not the reason Labour lost their overall majority in the House of Commons. Scotland has only directly affected the outcome of the UK general election in 2 out of all the general elections that we've had since the Second World War. But it is a good place to start when the safest Labour seats in the UK are being lost. The thing is that Labour has been seen as part of the political establishment for some time, that there is very little difference in actual fact between themselves and the Conservatives. That could not have been any clearer when key marginal seats that were between Labour and the SNP this time around, the Conservatives in those constituencies were telling their supporters to vote Labour. They're supposed to be the big rivals, opposite ends, and yet they want to keep one of the two of them in, rather than open the door to a multi-party system. They're all in cahoots. We've suspected it for quite some time, and now it's official. I mean, to give you an idea how bad that is, it's a bit like Tottenham Hotspur deliberately losing a league game against Chelsea just to stop Arsenal winning the title. So, the Scottish National Party just about swept the board in Scotland. They took 56 out of the 59 seats, to immediately run into accusations from the media south of the border that we've suddenly become a one-party state. I mean, never mind the fact that they were democratically elected to 56 out of the 59 seats. Oh no, we're a one-party state. And that is another problem that Labour faced south of the border in the election as a whole. The Conservatives played a blinder in their campaigning by convincing everybody that there would be chaos if Labour and the SNP got in. There's absolutely no reason that there would be, but people believed it. The bigger problem here for Labour is that SNP has just become Scotland's progressive party of choice. SNP are left of centre. So are Labour, apparently, but Scotland has suddenly decided that they want SNP to be their progressive voice in Westminster. That means that Labour has become obsolete in Scotland, and that is a big problem. And don't get me started on Jim Murphy. He's been an unpopular leader for quite some time now, and he didn't win any friends in the debates when he more or less told some lies in there and accused others of lying instead. But here's the thing. A disastrous night for the Lib Dems, and Nick Clegg resigns. Ed Miliband resigned as head of the Labour Party. Nigel Farage even resigned, although it looks like he might be coming back. Yet Jim Murphy, who is officially the worst leader Scottish Labour has ever had, they are facing the biggest crisis they have ever had, says he is not considering his position. Is that still the case when this goes out? No, he really still isn't considering his position. Wow. Okay then. So that is a major problem that Labour need to fix, and it's unlikely they will fix it. Why did this happen? Well, if you stab your core support in the back, then that is what will happen. I've already talked about them being part of the political establishment. One way that manifested itself is in the referendum campaign. You see, the yes-no vote was not exclusively, but largely a left-right issue. The Yes campaign was mostly supported by people on the left. If you were in other parts of the UK, you could be forgiven for thinking it was between the SNP and everybody else. It wasn't. All the major parties, and reasonably minor parties, left of centre in Scotland were part of the Yes campaign, apart from Labour. And that confirmed to everyone what Labour is really all about. Because an independent Scotland would be great news for Labour. We are a progressive, liberal nation. Labour could win majority governments, possibly, even under proportional representation, especially if the SNP disbanded having got their main goal. But propping up their buddies down south, remaining part of the political elite, was more important to them. And a lot of Labour supporters voted yes. So it's very difficult to recover from that. And that leaves the SNP fighting the corner for Scotland in Westminster. And they'll have a hard job on their hands because they are up against a Conservative majority. But what is more important is that the message that is sent. Because the SNP and the Conservatives do not get on. They are famous for it. They're clearly worse than Labour and Conservative, as I have already mentioned. Scotland voted so overwhelmingly in favour of the SNP and yet got the complete opposite as a government. That's an illustration in itself. Now, I'm not saying that Scotland is ready for independence. It was only last September that we voted no. And there will be no voters that voted SNP in the general election, because Scottish people are quite good at telling the difference between the SNP and independence. We know that we cannot have independence without a second referendum, which means that if we agree with the SNP's progressive policies, we can vote for that without running the risk of getting an independence that we don't actually want. It can't happen without a second referendum. Yet we've got a Conservative government that wants to scrap the Human Rights Act, as I've already said, and there could be other baggage as well. Now, the good news for Scotland is that we have a devolved parliament. We can make our own decisions on a lot of issues, and a lot of the bad Tory policies we will be able to stop at our front door. But not all of them. There are legal loopholes everywhere. As for those of you in England, Wales and Northern Ireland, you are in a bit more trouble. Because you believed that the SNP would bring chaos, forgetting that they are a progressive party and would have done a lot of good for you in Westminster. So you voted in the Conservatives to deal with the threat of the SNP. And you will have no comeback when they try and sell the NHS. You will have no comeback when they try and scrap the Human Rights Act. I'm not entirely sure what I can tell you. I'm not entirely sure what I can do for you. All I can say is, you got yourself into this mess, you get yourself out of it.